You know that feeling at the end of a really long day when you finally get home, you close the front door behind you, and it feels like, well, like the muscles in your face just physically drop.
Oh, absolutely. It's like this sheer muscular fatigue of maintaining social acceptability all day.
Exactly. Like you've been holding up this invisible present smile, this exhausting posture of, you know, everything is perfectly fine for 10 hours straight.
Right. We all carry that tension. I mean, constantly measuring how much of ourselves is actually safe to show in public.
Yeah, and what you're feeling in that exhausted moment is basically the weight of the performance. And today, we are taking a deep dive into a complete masterclass on what happens when a person just refuses to perform anymore.
It is such a brilliant piece of source material we're looking at today.
It really is. It's a manuscript titled After the Crash. It's attributed to Max and Claude, but it's presented to us as this fictional, unpublished meta-novel written by the legendary American wit Dorothy Parker, supposedly penned back in 1952.
And, the dual-layered nature of this manuscript is really what gives it so much psychological depth.
Yeah, tell us about that dual layer.
Well, on the narrative surface, you have this story of Victoria Cross. She is a 37-year-old society wife in 1938 New York who abruptly just stops playing the game of polite society. She moves to Paris right as Europe is descending into World War II.
Which is wild timing.
Right.
Yeah.
But beneath that, on the meta level, you have an aging, cynical Dorothy Parker. At 63 years old, basically using Victoria as a fictional avatar to execute all the brave, reckless choices that Parker herself was, frankly, too terrified to make.
Let's start with that meta layer because, the setup just pulls you in immediately. We have Dorothy Parker acting as the narrator, and she is being hounded by this young, ambitious publisher to write her memoirs.
And she flat out refuses.
Completely refuses. Her reasoning is that memoirs demand ugly truths, while fiction is entirely negotiable. She actually tells the publisher, I've spent too many years in the business of beautiful lies to start trafficking in ugly truths now.
Such a great line. And Parker is surprisingly transparent about her own regrets in this prologue. I mean, if you look at American literary history, Dorothy Parker and the Algonquin Round Table in the 1920s, they were the absolute epicenter of cultural gatekeeping.
Right, the ultimate tastemakers.
Exactly. But looking back from 1952, Parker just dismisses that entire era. She tells the publisher it wasn't the golden age of American wit, it was just the golden age of American gin.
Wow.
Yeah, she actually refers to her legendary peers as drunks who could spell.
That is so brutal, but so Parker.
Very Parker. And so, by creating Victoria, Parker is engineering a woman who embodies everything she wishes she had been, someone who doesn't have to constantly perform to be valued.
But Victoria's actual day-to-day reality in 1938 is just suffocating. She's 37, she's been married to this wealthy man named Richard for 12 years, and the manuscript describes them as sleeping in separate beige bedrooms.
The color beige is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
So much heavy lifting, it's just perfectly bleak. And on top of this hollow marriage, she is having this mind-numbingly tedious affair with a man named David. And the breaking point for all of this happens during a lunch date on Madison Avenue.
Oh, that lunch scene. It dissects the breakdown of apathy so precisely. Because Victoria's apathy isn't a personality trait, it is a meticulously cultivated survival mechanism.
Right. So David shows up 14 minutes late, and Parker notes that being 14 minutes late is either completely thoughtless or highly calculated.
And with men of that era, it's totally impossible to tell which.
Exactly. So he sits down and he tells Victoria that he loves her, but, quote, in his way. And instead of being heartbroken or desperate, Victoria simply snaps out of her trance.
She just wakes up.
She realizes she has zero desire for his love. She looks at him and says, I want you to lie better. The truth is so terribly ordinary.
I love that moment because the exhaustion of not noticing has finally caught up to her. For 12 years, Victoria has been pouring all her energy into ignoring reality.
Yeah, keeping up the act.
Right. She's tired of measuring her drinks, so she appears charming rather than sloppy. She's as exhausted from pretending she doesn't know David is sleeping with his secretary. So when she asks him to lie better, she's basically asking for the performance to at least be entertaining enough to justify her playing along.
And when it isn't, the invisible smile just drops.
Exactly.
While reading this, the specific analogy kept coming to my mind regarding Victoria's existence. She is essentially living as an expensive lamp.
Okay. An expensive lamp. Say more about that.
Yeah, so think about those ridiculously overpriced sculptural lamps you see in high-end architectural magazines. They don't actually give off decent light.
Right. They're useless for reading.
Completely useless. You could never read a book by one. Their entire function is to sit in a room and serve as decorative proof that the owner had wealth and impeccable taste. And for you, tuning into this deep dive right now, think about how often you might have stayed in a prestigious job or a picture-perfect relationship simply because it looks successful to the people around you. You become the lamp in someone else's living room.
That's a brilliant way to frame it. And Margot, Victoria's ruthlessly pragmatic friend, actually diagnoses this exact dynamic later in the text.
Is she?
Yeah, she points out that men like Richard and David are collectors. They acquire money, they acquire classic cars, and beautiful women. The woman's role is just to quietly appreciate their taste in choosing her.
Wow.
So Parker's meta-commentary here is laying bare the brutal economic and social reality for women in the 1930s. You really had two structural choices. You could marry well and become a decorative object, or marry badly and suffer in poverty.
Right, and Victoria's realization on Madison Avenue is that the marry well option is really just a well-upholstered prison. So she goes straight home from that lunch, casually snoops through her husband Richard's desk, and finds a deeply passionate letter from his mistress.
And her reaction is the most telling part of the whole chapter.
It really is. There is no anger, there are no tears, there is only this profound physical relief. The 12-year performance has officially been canceled.
Because the friction between who she's supposed to be and who she actually is has just become too much to sustain. You can't maintain polite social fictions when you no longer fear the consequences of losing them.
Which leads us to her radical act of non-participation, the Thanksgiving dinner scene in Connecticut.
Oh, this scene is incredible.
It perfectly illustrates this non-participation. So Victoria arrives at the home of her mother-in-law, Eleanor. Eleanor is 72 years old money, and the manuscript describes her as wearing her disappointment like pearls.
Such a good description.
The tension in the room is just suffocating. But instead of playing the dutiful, apologetic daughter-in-law, Victoria pours herself a glass of straight bourbon, looks Eleanor dead in the eye, and casually drops the fact that she knows all about Richard's mistress.
Just detonates the whole thing.
Right. In 3 sentences, she completely obliterates the family's carefully curated facade.
And what makes that scene so powerful is the mechanism behind her behavior.
Yeah.
Like, she isn't having a screaming breakdown. She isn't crying.
No, she's perfectly calm.
Yeah, she is just calmly refusing to keep their secrets anymore. By stating the truth out loud, she forces the family to deal with the reality they have all been so aggressively ignoring.
And in the immediate aftermath of dropping that social grenade, Victoria retreats to her own apartment in the city. She locks herself in the unused nursery, which is a room specifically designed for the children she and Richard never had, by the way.
The irony is thick there.
Yeah, and she buys art supplies and just starts painting.
She transforms a space meant for societal expectation into a space for raw, unfiltered expression.
And the paintings she produces are described as loud, angry, and abstract. She openly admits her technique is terrible. I mean, she hasn't picked up a brush since college.
Right.
But the canvases are viscerally honest, and somehow this crude, angry art catches the attention of a gallery owner named Helen Fraser, who immediately offers Victoria a small show down in Greenwich Village.
Because Helen recognizes the difference between technical perfection and genuine emotion. She tells Victoria, "You have terrible technique, you fight the paint. But you have fury, you have need."
The need to communicate.
Exactly. That desperate need translates directly onto the canvas, completely bypassing all the polite rules of traditional portraiture.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because as a reader, this part felt heavily contrived to me.
Okay, how so?
Well, we are talking about a wealthy society wife who hasn't painted in over a decade. She just picks up some brushes, throws angry paint at a canvas, and suddenly a gallery owner in the village is giving her a solo exhibition. Doesn't this feel like Dorothy Parker just writing a pure, unadulterated wish fulfillment fantasy for herself?
I totally see why you'd say that. On the surface, it absolutely sounds like a romanticized fantasy.
Yeah.
But the nuance lies in the economics of who is actually buying this crude art and why they're buying it.
Okay.
The transactions aren't about the art establishment crowning her the next Picasso. Look at her first buyer, Alice Brennan.
The literature professor.
Right. Alice is a spinster literature professor at Barnard College. She painstakingly saves up $50, which, by the way, is a massive sum for her on a professor's salary in 1938.
Oh yeah, huge.
And she spends it just to buy Victoria's abstract painting titled Fury.
But why? Why does a struggling academic spend her life savings on objectively bad art?
Because the painting acts as a mirror. Alice actually writes Victoria this beautiful letter explaining her purchase. She says she has lived her entire adult life enduring the condescending pity of people wondering what is wrong with her that she never caught a husband.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Victoria's angry, chaotic painting validates Alice's own silent rage at those societal limitations. She is buying proof that someone else feels the same invisible suffocations that she does.
Oh, okay. That reframes the success entirely. It's not about critical acclaim at all. It's about emotional resonance.
Exactly. And the contrast is even sharper with her next major commission, Beatrice Harding.
Right, the society figure.
Yes, Beatrice is highly visible. She's wealthy, multi-divorced, and 63 years old. Beatrice pays Victoria a staggering $500 for a portrait, but she attaches a very strict condition.
She forbids Victoria from flattering her.
Right. She demands to be painted exactly as she is. She wants Victoria to capture the wrinkles, the 63 years of exhaustion, the loneliness, and just the absolute fatigue of having to be gracious all the time.
There is a line from Beatrice in that scene that literally gave me goosebumps. She says, "Flattery dies when you do. Truth lasts."
So good. Beatrice is paying a premium for the unflattering truth. In the circles these women run in, every portrait, every photograph, every single interaction is airbrushed by manners and expectations. Beatrice doesn't want technical perfection. She wants a historical record of her actual existence.
The value is the honesty.
Yeah, the value of Victoria's art is the honesty it provides in a world that's just starved for it.
So Victoria is finding this strange, raw validation in New York. But her newfound honesty creates massive ideological friction with her old life. I mean, you cannot paint brutal truths in the afternoon and then attend polite society dinners in the evening.
You really can't.
And this ideological clash is perfectly embodied by her friend Margot. Margot is the ultimate foil to Victoria's rebellion.
Margot is fascinating. She approaches the patriarchal trap like a grandmaster playing chess. While Victoria chooses non-participation, Margot chooses to master the system. She secures a highly lucrative divorce from her cheating husband. She chops her hair into a sharp, modern Louise Brooks bob. And her stated philosophy is simple. She says, trade up.
Just use the rules built by men to extract wealth and buy your dignity with a massive settlement.
Exactly.
But the armor of wealth isn't impenetrable, because over a very expensive lunch, Margot's facade cracks. She confesses to Victoria that her extreme cleverness, her strategic marriages, and her financial independence have really just led to a profound, echoing loneliness.
It's a hollow victory.
Right. So Margot proposes a radical pivot. She says, let's flee, let's go to Paris. And in October 1938, they board a ship.
And setting this escape in Paris in late 1938 is a critical narrative choice by Parker. It places these women in the twilight of the interwar period, right on the precipice of global devastation. It raises the stakes of their personal liberation immensely.
It says history is moving fast.
Right. Now, Margot eventually falls back into her old patterns. She meets a wealthy man named Jean-Paul, marries him, and moves back to New York to have a baby whom she ironically names Victoria.
Naturally.
But Victoria makes a different choice. She stays in Europe.
The way the manuscript describes Victoria's transformation in Paris, it really reminded me of renovating a very old house.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so you start ripping off the layers of wallpaper, you tear away the Mrs. Richard Cross layer, you peel off the perfect society hostess layer, you scrape away the apologetic, agreeable woman layer, and eventually, underneath decades of performative floral prints, you finally hit the original brick.
And finding the brick is a shock to the system.
It is, because the brick isn't conventionally pretty. It's rough, it's abrasive. But more importantly, removing the wallpaper exposes the house to the elements. Shedding your identity is physically uncomfortable and it's socially dangerous. But the brick is structurally sound. It is undeniably real.
That's spot on. Displacement is a powerful mechanism for identity shift. When you're in your hometown or your established social circle, you are tethered to everyone else's expectations of you. You are a daughter, a wife, a colleague.
You're playing a role.
Right. But in Paris, Victoria has zero history. Nobody knows about the beige bedroom or the Madison Avenue lunch. The external validators are just gone. She ends up discovering an avant-garde salon at 47 Rue de Seine run by a woman named Simone Laurent.
Simone is such a vivid character. She smokes a pipe, she hosts these underground gatherings of female artists, writers, and expatriates. And in this environment, Victoria isn't viewed as a disgraced American society wife. To them, she is simply the angry American.
And Simone introduces Victoria to a completely different economy of value. Take Katya, for example, a young Polish refugee who attends the salon. Katya left her entire life behind to pursue art, and she empties her tiny purse to buy one of Victoria's paintings for mere francs.
Which is crazy because Victoria accepts a handful of change for a painting when she was making $500 a pop in New York.
But that's the point, because the transaction in Paris has nothing to do with commerce. It is about mutual recognition. Katya looks at Victoria's chaotic painting about displacement and sees her own refugee experience reflected back. They are forging a community built entirely on shared rebellion and survival.
But the reality of survival is about to get terrifyingly literal.
Very quickly.
We hit September 1939. Germany invades Poland. Britain and France declare war. The historical clock just starts screaming. The American embassy is plastering Paris with frantic notices for citizens to evacuate. Helen, her gallery owner, is sending desperate telegrams from New York. Margot is begging her to come back to safety. And Victoria refuses to leave.
She consciously chooses to stay as Paris enters what historians call the phony war.
Right.
It was that agonizing, surreal period spanning the freezing winter of 1939 into the spring of 1940. War had been declared, but the massive military clashes hadn't fully erupted in France yet. It was a period defined by paralyzing dread and waiting.
And the manuscript does not romanticize her living conditions during this time. Simone allows Victoria to live in this miserable, unheated attic room. The nearest toilet is 3 blocks down the street. The winter is so brutally cold that Victoria has to sleep wearing all her clothing, and she paints wearing heavy gloves with the fingers cut off.
It's completely brutal.
And under these punishing conditions, she completes a 12-piece series of canvases documenting the fear, the isolation, and the collective breath-holding of a city waiting for violence.
But despite the physical suffering, the text makes it clear that she has never felt more alive.
Okay, honestly, this is where I was practically yelling at the manuscript. Yes. As a reader, it is incredibly frustrating. Are we seriously supposed to romanticize freezing in an attic while the Wehrmacht is marching toward the border? She is an American citizen with the means to escape. Risking death or an internment camp to paint amateur canvases isn't finding yourself. It feels like playing a reckless, arrogant game of chicken with history. I mean, why not just go home?
From a purely logistical standpoint, it seems like absolute madness.
Right.
But psychologically, this is the entire crux of Dorothy Parker's exploration. Victoria articulates her reasoning to Simone in that freezing attic. She explains that if she runs back to the safety of New York, the moment her new life becomes physically threatening, she will spend the rest of her existence haunted by a terrible question.
She won't know if it was real.
Exactly. She will never know if she was genuinely brave or if she was just a wealthy tourist playing a fun game of bohemian artist until the weather turned bad.
Ah, so the danger is the crucible. It's the only way to prove the transformation wasn't just a phase.
Yes. Returning to New York would mean admitting that the entire escape to Paris was just an extended vacation from her real life as Richard's wife. She needs the undeniable proof of her own independence. And as Simone points out, for the first time in her life, Victoria is creating something larger than her own ego.
The art itself.
Right. Her paintings are becoming a historical record. They are evidence that women were there, that they felt the terror of the phony war, and that they did not look away.
The waiting inevitably ends, though. May 1940 arrives, and the Germans invade France. Paris is on the verge of falling. And at this critical moment, Simone steps in and forcefully makes the decision for Victoria.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and Simone delivers this absolute gut punch of a line. She says, "Martyrdom is only meaningful if someone witnesses it."
Chills.
If Victoria stays and dies in a camp, her canvases will just be destroyed or rot in an attic. The art requires her survival.
It is a profound shift from reckless bravery to purposeful preservation. She meticulously packs her canvases, and she and Simone flee to Toulouse on one of the very last trains out of the city.
Just in the nick of time.
Yeah. She chooses to survive, but she does it to protect the evidence of the truth she found, not to return to the comfort she fled.
And the narrative essentially ends there, but Dorothy Parker provides this fascinating meta-epilogue that pulls us out of the fiction and back into her cynical perspective.
Right, the 1952 Parker.
Yeah. Parker sketches out the rest of Victoria's life in just a few paragraphs. Victoria manages to return to New York in 1941, just before America officially enters the war. She visits Margot. She meets her namesake baby. She never remarries. She moves into a modest apartment in the village, continues to paint every day, and eventually passes away in 1967.
And then there's the obituary.
The kicker is the obituary. The New York Times publishes a small piece calling Victoria Cross a minor American painter. After risking her life, after shedding her entire identity, she is labeled minor.
Yet within the frameworks of Parker's philosophy, that label is a massive triumphant victory.
How so?
The thesis of the manuscript is that being minor and real is a monumental achievement compared to being major and false.
Because she could have easily been a major society figure.
Exactly. She could have had her picture in the social pages every single week. She could have hosted the grandest parties in Manhattan, perfectly manicured, incredibly wealthy, and entirely hollow inside.
Just another expensive lamp.
Right. Instead, she chose to become a minor artist, whose work actually meant something to the broke college professors and the lonely widows who saw it. Her crude, angry paintings became tangible proof that she chose the impossibility of an authentic life over the suffocating comfort of a fake one.
Minor and real. That phrase really sticks with you. You know, when you pull back and look at the entire deep dive, the brilliance of After the Crash is how it functions as a mirror. A fictional avatar allowed Dorothy Parker, a woman who felt trapped by the exhausting performance of her own legendary cynical wit, to safely explore the sheer terror and the profound joy of simply dropping the act.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
Victoria's terrible, honest paintings, much like Parker's manuscript itself, they stand as evidence that they were here and that they tried against all societal pressure to tell the truth.
And the resonance of the story really lies in the universality of that struggle. I mean, it is about the immense courage required to step out of the roles that have been constructed for us, even when stepping out means facing the freezing cold of uncertainty.
Which brings us back to you, listening to this right now. Think about the different roles you find yourself performing on a daily basis. Think about the invisible smiles you hold during meetings, or at family gatherings, or in relationships that look perfect from the outside.
The layers of wallpaper.
Exactly. What is one expensive lamp routine in your own life that you could choose to walk away from today? Even if it means giving up the comfort of the beige room just to finally feel the weather on your face.